Hello, my name is Jodi Bond, and I am so appreciative to be a part of this climate summit. This is my second time appearing at the summit 3 years ago when I was a member of the insurance industry. And now today, again, I want to thank Commissioner Kreidler and the entire team that has put this production together. I am so grateful for his leadership. I really admire him. On the front end, I do have to say that, you know, who better than to serve as insurance commissioner than someone who was a smoke jumper, trained to be a smoke jumper, and who understands what it's like to be a first responder in a crisis, working in our communities in the area of remediation. Next, Commissioner Kreidler also has been someone I've admired for a long time because as the longest serving insurance commissioner in the country, he has really played a leadership role on climate issues, not only domestically, but internationally. He's really been at the forefront of these issues for such a long time. And then also as the leading advocate for the consumers in Washington State, he has such an adept understanding of the need for availability and pricing to be accurate so that the liquidity is available to the consumers to have choices. And for all those reasons, plus the fact I'm actually from Olympia, Washington, and my grandmother several decades ago worked for him. It's just an extra joy to be here, to be invited, and to be speaking. It's so clear that in the midst of climate disruptions, this is fertile ground to again be talking about social and economic resilience and what's needed. How do we deliver a quality of actions and at what cost that help our communities remain or enhance resiliency overall? And when you think about the numbers that are estimated in place, somewhere varying from 1.7 to $6 trillion of social and economic impact due to climate disruption, the numbers can become overwhelming. And yet when we're in our communities, and I think about our friends, my family, anywhere from California to Oregon to Washington State, in the midst of what's happening on climate, we really start recognizing that we have to accelerate our actions. And we do that by creating frameworks toward action and outcome. And in this, we need to develop transparent and accurate and resilient systems that create the foundation for these frameworks toward action. And I think of three areas when I think about putting together any sort of set of accelerated mapping and plans for resiliency. I myself have been at the intersection of global business and government for 3 decades now. And yet for the last 2 years, have been a part of a strategy firm that puts ESG at the center of any growth model. And my colleagues and I have been working in the space of global business, global technology, global energy, global commodities, global financial services. And we know how difficult it can be for companies to right the ship and focus in on enhanced frameworks or ESG modeling. But we also recognize that you have to start somewhere. And one prevailing question or area of concentration is how do insurers insure themselves against the risk of taking on their customers? Do their customers have valid ESG frameworks in place to deliver commitments toward action and outcomes? And what we do, because we know that you need to meet the customer where they're at. I talked about, how do you right the ship? Well, is the ship near the port? Is the ship way out at sea? Is the ship even in the water? Do they have any ESG framework in place? And we find that that businesses tend to be in three different categories. Some of them are ostriches. Their head's still in the sand where climate disruption is concerned, and they could be blindsided. And we need to meet them where they're at and help them develop any type of framework toward an environmental and social and governance model that will give them some resiliency. The next category of companies that we look at are what we call needy companies. They're ones who have a basic framework of an ESG or sustainability plan as part of their reporting, but it really needs to be integrated into the broader framework of their business plan, and they need to understand the why and the outcomes that they want to achieve by enhancing their framework and their modeling. The third set of companies that we look at are the activist companies. These are the companies that whose business model was predicated upon a values-based, sustainable business model. And they could be a B Corp, or they could be a company. I mean, many of them were born in Washington State, and they have this very accelerated approach to ESG because sustainability is part of their ethos. But due to economic disruptions, climate disruptions, supply chain interruptions, COVID, they need some sort of newly invigorated mapping and modeling and framework toward action that will help them with their own growth plan. And I think companies have the ability to report out, and then insurers have a better ability to guesstimate or put some predictability and transparency into the modeling of their own risk. And that's one really big area that needs to be focused in on in order for there to be enhanced resiliency in the marketplace. The second area that I would look at in terms of enhancing resiliency is that when we look at ambitious goals on carbon, when we think about the fact that we want to get to net zero by 2050, and yet in order to get there, we need a 50% reduction then in all emissions by 2030. That's 9 years to get there. The outstanding question has really been around the fact that pricing is so variable. There needs to be some sort of transparency that gives predictive modeling the opportunity to enhance the acceleration toward outcomes. And I would submit that carbon pricing is an area of predictability that has been part of the debate, but not in a real palpable way. So my colleagues and I would submit that in an industry call to action, if you will, on carbon pricing and transparency, taking some of the variability out of play and putting more predictive measures into place is a really important component of accelerating our ability to achieve ambitious goals on carbon reduction. The third and final area that I thought that I would touch on today is the fact that accelerated frameworks are really needed in order to have the type of outcomes and resiliency that we are going to need in order to have our communities and be safe and have the response systems secure and in place. And in some ways, there are a lot of different areas where cross-sharing of information is taking place, especially between sometimes between NGOs and governments, or between governments and the private sector, or between private sector and the NGOs. Yet there needs to be an accelerated, almost virtuous cycle of collaboration between the private sector, the public sector, governments, and NGOs. And currently, there are so many technologies. Some of them are being deployed and some are not. But there is a way to put together current technologies and use this as a part of mapping through cross-sharing of information and speeding up or accelerating the way that we're cross-sharing this information with each other. And I just want to say that the National Association of Insurance Commissioners has been really on top of resiliency and climate issues, and that has been a lot of the work of Commissioner Kreidler to accelerate those discussions, and yet including maybe NGOs as a piece of this virtuous cycle of information sharing and planning, again, focused on commitments, frameworks, and actions toward reporting and outcomes. And I think that we will accelerate our opportunity to create greater resiliency in the midst of the climate disruptions that are upon us and will continue to be upon us. With that, I just again wanted to thank the insurance commissioner. I want to thank Governor Inslee and all of the team that is part of this dialogue and allowing this dialogue to take place. And I hope that Commissioner Kreidler can continue to be a person who is training and developing and leading all these future leaders on this is what organizational courage model looks like. And that is something that we applaud and appreciate being a part of the conversation. So thank you.